am your host, Cindy Watson, and today we're going to be talking with Blair Campbell about insuring your law firm so that you can protect what you love. So welcome, Blair. It is great to have you here.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
And for those who don't know Blair, Blair Campbell is the founder of Coastal Insurors, and he works specifically with attorneys and administrators of law firms to insure them for professional liability. And we all know a thing or two about that. But not only does he give advice on how to obtain the best rates possible, but the thing I loved about Blair as well is that he educates lawyers on better law office management to help them prevent or avoid claims, which can help them to practice more on purpose. So Blair, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what made you want to pursue a career in insurance.
Well, that's an interesting little story. I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio, so I say I'm a Buckeye or a worthless nut. When I was in college getting a degree in business, I was asked, what did I want to do? And I didn't have a clue. And I said, I know the two things I don't want to do. I don't want to work for family and I don't want to sell insurance. And my second job, and the job I've had ever since, has been working for my father-in-law in the insurance industry.
So never say never.
Yes, never say never, and be careful what you say you won't do. Yeah. So, but I fell in love with not necessarily insurance, because I don't do what you would typically think of insurance. I don't do homeowners and auto and life insurance. I found a special niche that I really like, working with professionals and helping them in the area, and that being primarily professional liability for lawyers.
Okay. And how did you fall into that or decide to sell malpractice insurance for attorneys? That is
it was the business my father-in-law was in. He actually owned an insurance company and had an insurance agency that was tied to the company. And I went to work for the insurance agency and kind of liked what was going on and started as an underwriter and learned the business that way. And from there, I decided I wanted to be on the other side, on the sales side, because I'm a little more of the sales style than I am an underwriting style. And so I got my insurance license 41 years ago. Wow. Yes, I was 12 when it happened. But,
you beat me to the punch, darn it.
But I just kind of fell into that and loved the niche and loved working with professionals.
Okay, beautiful. Well, as you probably gathered from the title of this podcast, I'm sort of on a mission to help lawyers get away from that more competitive, fight mode, sort of soul-sucking mode of practicing law into a more collaborative way of practicing with purpose. So I'd be interested to know, how do you define success, and what's one of the things you attribute your success to?
Well, I think that success can be defined. I think that's a definition for each individual person. I don't think there's a single definition for success. The world may say there is one, but I disagree. But some people are happy being farmers, and other people would say, I could never be a farmer, yet that's their passion, that's their mission. And if they're good at it, then that's successful. I find one of my taglines on my email is that if you don't have an attitude of service, then leadership is not in your DNA. And I don't know who said it. I picked it up from somewhere, but I really am in the service business. I sell insurance, but I work for my clients. I'm an extension of their law firm. I'm the professional liability or the risk management side of their practice. And so my job is to help them mitigate or those types of situations with clients. And so my success has been the fact that I've got clients that I've had for 30 some years since I started my agency in 1990. Nice. And the success of that is that they understand that I have that attitude towards them and they trust me. And to me, that's success.
I think that's a beautiful definition. I love that. And I mean, the one thing I really particularly love about it is this idea that it's individual, because I think we're so conditioned to define success all in the same way, normally surrounded around money. So I love that you say it's an individual. And the first words out of you talked about passion and mission and service. And I think those are three beautiful elements that if people practice that way, if they live their life that way, that is a successful life. That's a life well lived. I love that, Blair.
Well, I will tell you, that's a change in attitude and a change of mantra for me. When I was originally started my agency, I make no bones about it. It was about making money because, I needed to pay bills, and I had a wife and 2 children. And, those were the things that drove me to work hard. But it wasn't long after that I realized that it was really more important, and where my success really came from was when my clients didn't think I just had my hand out reaching for a check.
Yeah.
that it was, look, you can buy from me or not buy from me. I'll help you any way I can.
Yeah.
And from that, that's built a trust factor with my clients that's gone way beyond collecting a check or a commission or writing a policy.
Beautiful. And I think you've touched on another really important point there too, which is that it's never too late to change our mindsets about that. I know myself, in terms of practicing with purpose, for the, at the beginning of my career, I bought into that myth that toughness is what carried the day. And that's what clients expected. And that's how you had to show up. And, my clients called me the Barracuda, and they meant it as a compliment. And I am embarrassed now to say I wore it. So for all of you out there, for our listeners and our viewers, know, if you've been practicing in a way that doesn't fill your boots, that you don't feel passionate about, it is never too late to change that, as Blair and I can attest. So I love that.
Yes.
So tell us some of your hot tips or your best tips, Blair, on better law firm management to limit liability and beyond, if you've got
Okay. All right. Because while professional liability is our main focus, there are other aspects of a practice that have insurance issues. And I don't want to go, we could do 10 of these
nice.
in all the different areas of insurance that a law firm may want or need or have an exposure in. But I'll look at only two or discuss really two, primarily professional liability insurance. And this all starts with an application. Everything starts with an application in the insurance industry. You just can't say, hey, I want to, I get clients or new clients who pick up the phone and say, hey, I need a quote. Well, I don't know enough about your practice. I don't know what you do. I mean, what areas of practice are you in? How many attorneys are in the firm? How long have you been in practice? Are you presently insured? Have you had any claims? These are all issues that go into making up a rating structure for a policy. So everything starts with the application. And if I could tell your clients one thing that's the most important piece of the application, well, I'm going to change that. Two things. Number one is this application is going to go in front of somebody that doesn't know you. They sit in a cubicle or they sit at home and they look at these forms all day long. That's their job. This is your one opportunity to show them you're special, you're unique, you're a good attorney, you're a good law firm, you're a law firm that deserves an equitable premium for your exposure. If the application is hard to read, if your handwriting is terrible, if you don't answer all the questions, and you laugh, but I get those all the time. We get those every week. I can't read the application. You didn't answer all the questions. You didn't fill out the forms. And for a industry where attorneys are supposed to follow the rules and follow the procedures and do things the way they're supposed to, they don't follow the application very well on a regular basis.
Yeah, we're not so good at doing it for ourselves. That's for sure.
Right. And that's that. So the first thing is you're making an impression to that underwriter as to what kind of firm and how important do you think this is? Did you just haphazardly complete an application, which means you don't really care? This is just something you feel you have to have, and it's not something that you are really interested in knowing that you're getting the right things.
Sure.
The second piece is the most important piece on the application is what's called the area of practice. It's a grid on every application, and it says, this is what you do. I work in appellate work. I work in family law. I work in litigation. I'm a workers' comp attorney, whatever it may be.
Sure.
Those areas of practice really determine what your rate's going to be, because some of those are more hazardous in the industry than others.
Yeah.
And so having that completed accurately and properly, and actually talking to your agent ahead of time, knowing what are those areas that are more hazardous or going to create a higher rate than the other. Those are the things that make the most difference in professional liability, getting a quote, getting an accurate assumption of your risk.
Okay. And leaving aside the quote, like the application piece for a moment, because I'd love to be able to pick your brain a little bit while we've got you, especially with all of that wealth of experience. What are some of the sort of practice management areas that you see, because that are going to be a more general application for our listeners here, things that you see that are, best practices, ways to make the practice run more smoothly, things that will help limit liability sort of more generally, just if you're showing up this way or practicing this way? I'd love any insight you have on that.
Well, okay, great. You have to go back and look at where claims come from, and that'll give us an indication of what practice areas. There's not a question on the application for the most part outside of name, address, phone number that isn't designed because there was a claim based on that question. The underwriter didn't ask that question and the claim came about and they went, oh, wow, if we had asked that question, we would have known not to write that at a law firm.
Sure.
So one of the things, we look at statute of limitations as one of the major factors that attorneys, you wouldn't think they'd miss with all the calendaring we have, but the calendaring of how you do that is, they ask for, do you have dual calendar systems and are they independent of each other? Meaning, and that's not, I have something on my phone and I have something on my laptop. Those could be the same app. And if it's garbage in, it's garbage out.
Sure.
So actually understanding how those systems work, how you manage your time, your timing of when you have to file and the statute of limitation issues. That's one of those things. The other things we see is engagement letters that are not used. This is a huge issue for insurance companies. It's a huge issue for a law firm, that the line of defense is the engagement letter. It says, what were you going to do? What services were you performing? But beyond that, and what we really get into issues are, is who was the client? Mm-hmm. Was it the husband? Was it the wife? Was it both? Was it the child? Is it the board of directors? Is it the CEO? Is it the president? Yeah. Who are you representing? That is a paramount in putting an engagement letter. What services are you actually going to offer? What are the things you're going to do? How are you going to handle billing? How are you going to handle arbitration if there's a problem? Is there mediation involved? These are things that an engagement letter will make the practice run smoother, because basically when you are dealing with a new client, you're getting married. It's real easy to get married. It's really hard to get divorced. If the contract, that engagement letter is strong and is definable, then things run a lot smoother for you and the client.
I love that. Who are you representing? And again, for our listeners out there, I think it's something we often take for granted. Somebody comes in the door and it's like, okay, we're going along, even when it's a complicated fact situation. But right. I think that would apply whether you're talking family law, whether you're talking civil litigation components. I know myself, having practiced labor law and social justice for years, technically my client is the trade union, but I'm representing grievers in their individual cases, and their expectations may be different than that of the union. So getting clarity around that, who are you representing, I think is great advice, Blair.
And also, the ones you're not, the one, and so if there is a husband and wife situation, are you getting a waiver if you're going to represent both?
Yeah.
On a real estate deal, if we say they shouldn't, but are they handling both sides of a real estate transaction? Yeah. Did you get a waiver from both parties that this was okay? So those are some of the things that create heartburn for an underwriter that you can easily avoid if you just practice certain things a little differently.
Yeah, I love that who question. As I'm thinking about it, I think it's like, who are you representing? Who else might be impacted? What, if any, role does that have? And I'm just thinking of a case myself where my husband was buying a new building for his business. He knew I wouldn't be thrilled about it because it was way beyond what we talked about. So he met with somebody. He's got the whole real estate deal going ahead. They needed to get sign off on a mortgage that we had for financing. And incredibly to me, his lawyer had told him that he didn't need my input on that, right? Which was surprising advice. And this is a lawyer we had used jointly for our real estate deals previously. So it raised all kinds of interesting issues, not the least of which were in our relationship, but we're happy to say we sorted all that out. But my goodness. Good. So what role, if any, do you think your relationship with clients plays in terms of having a better practice in your experience in practice management, but also in terms of potentially limiting those claims?
Are you talking about from me to my client, or from the
lawyer?
No,
sorry, for client? Lawyers, like for our listeners out there, their relationship with their client.
Some in a slightly different vein, someone asked me what the key was to my success, and I kind of said, it's a pretty low bar, but I return my phone calls.
Yeah.
But you'd be surprised how often phone calls are not returned, emails are not answered, and that communication level with the client is paramount. You want to have a good relationship with your client. Answer the phone, answer the emails, do it in a timely fashion. It may not be the most important case to you. It is certainly the most important case to your client. They really don't think you have any other clients. And of course, we all know that's false, but because it's their situation, most of the time this client is going through a legal battle for the first time they've ever gone through it. They don't understand, they're scared, they have all kinds of concerns, and you're that person's advocate
Yeah.
The way to best mitigate that is just good, common communication with your client.
I love that. I think that's an important reminder. Sometimes we get so caught up in the process and it's second nature to us. But for most people
Yes.
coming into a legal system, it's overwhelming. It's highly emotionally charged for them.
Yes.
There's a lot of fear that comes around it. And being able to show up as a lawyer with empathy every day, every time, remind yourself, put yourself in the shoes of that
Your
client
client.
and remind yourself what it's like from their perspective, I think is great advice. So,
Yeah.
so I'd love to hear, what are some insights that you've had in your career working with lawyers for so long about how they can best practice on purpose? And I know this is a little outside the insurance sphere, but you've had such close contact with a variety of lawyers over your life. So I'd love any insights you have on that. What have you seen about those lawyers who tend to practice more on purpose versus those that don't?
Well, it's interesting. Now, when I deal with my clientele, normally they only see me once a year for the most part, unless they've got a problem. So there's a little bit of a disconnect as to, I don't see them in their general practice every single day.
Of course.
But what I can tell you is, particularly over the last 2 years, I have seen a huge departure of attorneys from the industry. Part of that just being they were ready to go, but COVID kind of was the last straw and kicked them out. What I find in talking to clients that are really interested in or really passionate about what they do, and that's the point, they're passionate about what they do. It's not a business. I think so many attorneys get into this thinking, okay, I want to become a lawyer because it's a status symbol, or I want to become a lawyer because it helps me climb the corporate ladder in a certain way, whatever it may be, whether I'm practicing in a law firm or I'm practicing in a business sense. But if those attorneys that are successful and seem to be pleased with what they're doing are ones that have found a purpose in the way they practice, not in the law, it's in how they deal with this whole, yes, it's a business, but so is mine's a business too, but I don't really say I sell insurance. I'm an asset protectionist.
Yeah.
I'm protecting people's assets.
I like
and
that.
if you look at it that way, if you approach it that way, it's you're really an advocate for those clients. If you're passionate about that, they'll be able to listen to this podcast and some of the others. And I don't mean to say they'll never need you again, but they'll find their purpose in what's really good at what they're good at and why and what makes it successful for them. And they'll be happier. And if they don't, they'll be out of the practice. They'll move on. They'll find something else to do.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And it's perfectly aligned. You would have thought we rehearsed this because it's so perfectly aligned. It's the reason I started this podcast and why I've started my programming around practicing with purpose. I think that passion piece is missing. And we have lawyers leaving the practice in droves because they've lost that sense of purpose or passion. Right. Being able to refine that, find ways to rekindle that and bring it to your practice is a game changer.
I think the other piece of that, and pardon my interruption, but I find so many attorneys that when you say practice with purpose, they don't know what areas they want to practice in. And so they start in one area and they try something and, they try family law and they go, oh no, that's just not me. Then they go to litigation. No, that's not me. And they end up in elder law or they end up in some other area of practice, but they've wasted 10 years trying to find that.
Yeah.
Find that practice area that you really like. And it's based on, in my opinion, it's based on the client. Yeah. It's not on the law. What kind of client do you want to serve? You want to serve the elderly? Get into elder law. You want to deal in finance? Then work in a different area that equates that. If you like litigating because you like to argue or you like to go to court, then fine, be a litigator.
Yeah.
But find what that area of practice is and do that wholeheartedly. My practice, as I said, I don't write homeowners, I don't write auto. Yeah. We are very specific about the lines of coverage we do. We stay in our lane, we're a niche, and we know what we're good at, and we're passionate about it.
Yeah.
And hopefully it shows.
That is really insightful advice, actually. And I haven't heard it put quite that way. And it's funny because in the thought leader industry, everybody talks about niching down and about find your ideal client, find that ideal avatar. But we don't apply that in law. And I think it's brilliant advice for lawyers. So for all our listeners out there, I want to really put a pin in that point that Blair just made. I think it's great advice to say, well, sometimes we have it backwards, right?
Mhm.
Figure out who you want to serve. If you were to close
Right.
your eyes and imagine your ideal client, somebody that you
Right.
would feel passionate about serving every day, and build your practice around that, make that a niche, find that a niche. I think so often we start feeling we need to practice general law or serve
Mhm.
everybody or always do the big business, but decide who you want to serve and find a way to niche down to make that your practice. I think that's really, really insightful advice, Blair. I love that. Can you share a story about how insurance has helped somebody in your career and helped a law firm or a particular lawyer, and what would have happened without that coverage?
I just got off the phone 20 minutes before this call with a client who was in a horrible situation. And I can't go into the details for privacy's sake, but basically he was looking to me because he's not sure whether he's going to have a claim. He's worked through this whole case. He went a certain way. He wrote an opinion letter and he thought everything was done. And now the opposing counsel is questioning the deal they've made, and they're going to go back to the courts.
Mm.
And if the court rules against him, he's in essence committed malpractice because he's written an opinion letter that the client has signed off on. And so part of my job is as I see it, is first of all, listen. We're given 2 ears and 1 mouth,
Yeah.
and for a purpose. And
Yeah.
so I listened to him for probably 20 minutes, walked through this whole case and all that. And there was a bunch of minutia I didn't need to know, but he needed to tell me. And so it's just taking time to listen to what he had to say and then walk him back and go, okay, let's look at what the facts are, where we are. And look, you don't have a claim. Nobody sued you. You haven't done anything wrong. We don't know how the court's going to respond. Here's a number. Here's the carrier has a specific number for you to call for questions like this. Here's the number I suggest you call him. I'm not an attorney. Some things I refuse to do. That was a joke.
You're not alone, Blair.
But I can put him on the phone with someone who is an attorney who handles claims on a regular basis, has probably seen this situation before.
Yeah.
And by the time we were done, he was completely settled. His tone had changed. His manner of speech had changed. He was relaxed and he felt comfortable with where he was. And so, part of my job is being a counselor.
Yeah.
To some extent, but it starts with caring about your client.
And it's interesting because that advice also serves lawyers well. I think as lawyers, we are so conditioned to believe we need to have the answers all the time that we don't listen as effectively as we could.
And you're getting paid to do it. So why don't you just let the client talk?
It's so true. I love that.
So anyway, yeah.
Okay. Nope. That's
the advice I'd give.
So for all our listeners out there, speaking of listening, for all our listeners out there, viewers, I think you're well served as a lawyer as well. Listen to your clients, right? I mean, make them feel heard and seen, even when you know the direction they're going in. And I was guilty for so long. I'm like, I've heard this 1,000 times. I know where they're going, but this is their first time going back to your earlier advice. I think that's
exactly.
Well, Blair, I'd love to hear what impact, if any, that you found sort of comparing lawyers who bring a collaborative approach to the law versus those who have that little more aggressive sort of fight mode style. What, if any, impact has that had in what you see from your perspective?
Well, it's not very difficult if I go and make a presentation to a law firm. It's pretty easy to find the litigators.
Yeah.
They without telling you that they're a litigator, they tell you that they're a litigator. I don't find any fault in that. I think there are people who are just built that way, and there's a need for that kind of person. It's a matter of whether it gets personal or whether it stays solely business. And I'll tell a quick story. I used to play softball. I was the first non-attorney on an all-attorney softball team, and it was quite a compliment. And so what interested me at the very beginning was I knew all the players that were on the team at the time. There might have been 1 or 2 attorneys I didn't know, but for the most part, I knew the guys on the team. And they came from all different walks of life. There was a judge who was an attorney on the team. There were attorneys who practiced in private practice. There was a public defender. And I'll never forget one of the very first games I went to, there's the public defender talking to the attorney, and they're working out a deal.
Okay. And
I thought, well, isn't that interesting? And what it came out to say was all these guys were friends. Yeah. And the reason was because they didn't take their job personally. that's still a person on the other side of the courtroom, and they deserve my respect.
Yeah.
And so I think we get into this win-win-win mentality, win at all cost mentality, and that's how we're somewhat judged. But if it becomes win at all cost, that's where I see attorneys getting into trouble.
I love
And
that.
it affects their personal life because they can't disengage from that situation. The attorneys I know on a personal level all know how to leave it at
Yeah.
the office.
Yeah, I think that's so important and interesting. I think it ties back to what you were saying earlier about, how many lawyers are leaving the practice of law. I think
Yes.
when you show up in that fight mode all the time, it leaches over into your personal life. First, it affects those
does.
professional relationships. So you certainly wouldn't be playing ball together,
That's exactly
not
right.
without
Yeah.
full-on helmets and
Yeah.
protective gear. But then it starts leaching over into your personal life, and ultimately it affects your sense of self as well. So
Yeah, because it determines you see your self-worth as whether you've won or lost.
yeah.
And then you find out people don't like you because of the way you won.
Yeah.
And then it's a spiral that goes the wrong way.
That's so good because, and again, that aligns so much with my philosophy because I think one of the fundamental problems right now is that we have defined that success and the practice of law generally based on a totally adversarial model, when in fact being collaborative, not only, we've got to start recognizing those as wins because you can actually get much better outcomes for your clients rather than under our traditional adversarial model, where even the so-called win, lose, or draw, everybody walks away feeling completely, like they were Russell Crowe in The Gladiator, that they've just done, or maybe Muhammad Ali or George Chavello with 15 rounds with Muhammad Ali, right? So
yes, yeah, I've seen some of my successful litigators go into mediation.
Yeah,
as they've wind out of their litigation practice into mediation, and there's so much happen. They're just a totally different person because there's not this win, I've got to win at all cost scenario.
And what a beautiful approach if we could bring that mindset to our practice of law rather than feeling like we need to leave the practice altogether. And you may or may not have a comment in this. I'm wondering, have you seen any difference? You talked about passion earlier, comparing lawyers who love what they do versus those who you can tell are kind of tired of the grind. What, if any, impact does that have at your end when you see those claims coming through?
That's a great point. And where it plays out is the attorney that's lost interest starts to make mistakes. They don't pay attention to the detail, and they forget something, they miss something, they do something that they normally wouldn't do, or fail to do something that they would have done. And it's because they're just not engaged anymore.
Yeah.
Not at the level that they were.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
And we actually see this. There's a pattern in claims. We see claims early on from young attorneys, particularly if they're not mentored, if they go out kind of on their own too early. That they make mistakes. And then there's a period of time, and that's up to maybe the fourth or fifth year. And then we see a whole pattern where an attorney will go 10, 15 years with no issues at all. And then somewhere around the 21st, 22nd, 23rd year, they become successful. They become less interested, less engaged. They don't follow the law maybe the way they used to. And we see an increase in claims after about 20 years. For a short period of time. And there's nothing else to explain it except I've gotten other interests in my life that have drawn me away from my passion. I've got other things going. I'm running a practice now rather than just being the lawyer. And so I have all these things that are interrupting what I was really good at doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is an interesting perspective, and my brain's going even in terms of promoting my practicing with purpose, because it actually sounds like as well, those lawyers who can stay practicing on purpose and bring that passion to the table are less likely to end up attracting claims.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I love that.
There's no doubt about it. There's a direct correlation between the two.
Beautiful. That's great. And if I can ask you, Blair, what's one thing you know now that you wish you'd known when you first started? And again, it can apply not just in insurance, it can be insurance related or generally, but something that would be of service to our
I don't know whether this serves your client or not, but I'll say this. My kids, they get tired of hearing me say this because I learned this partway through my career. The world says it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's 100% wrong. It's not what you know. It's not who you know. It's who knows you. As
Oh.
an example, I know Barack Obama and I know Donald Trump, but they don't know me, and it doesn't do me any good.
That's good.
Networking and working with people is based on who knows you. The point would be, Cindy, if I picked up my phone and called you, and you saw my name, would you know to answer the phone?
Yeah.
Because you know me.
Yeah.
And whether that's fits into practicing with purpose or not, I don't know, but you asked me kind of an open question.
Yeah.
And my answer is that served me very well, because we all think networking is being on Facebook or LinkedIn or all these other things. And yeah, that's great. I have, I don't know, a couple of 2,000, 3,000 people that follow me on LinkedIn, but they don't really, not all of them know me. And I certainly don't know all of them. It's just somebody that's referred said, oh, I know so-and-so and you know so-and-so, so let's be on LinkedIn together. And that's not a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
That really resonates with me, because I think it's that relationship piece that's so important, right? Being
Yeah.
able to build that relationship and trust and bringing that empathy to the table and building your reputation through relationship, which is
Yeah.
totally in alignment, I think, with being, I think doing that allows you to practice more on purpose as
Yeah.
opposed to just being transactional.
Yeah. I don't know a business that's not relationship driven. And
Yeah.
if you are not relationship driven, you need to move on and find one that is for you.
Yeah. Beautiful. And as we're getting ready to wind down, I can't believe how quick our time has gone together, Blair. Anything else that you'd like to expand on? Any little nuggets you'd like to share?
Well, I'll just mention one other real quick piece about insurance, because that's my passion.
Yep.
There's always been this trend in the industry that, lawyers need malpractice insurance. We've had a new thing come along in the last 15, 20 years called the internet. And that's a really good thing in some respects, and it's been not so good thing in other respects. It's created a whole nother industry, and it's created a whole nother exposure to law firms, and that's called cyber liability. And most law firms are under the impression that if there's a cyber breach or a cyber loss, it's covered by their professional liability policy. It is not.
Wow.
Typically, it is not. You need a standalone cyber policy that covers you for wire transfer fraud, for data theft, for a number of different things that could take place in your law firm from that thing that sits on your desk called a computer that we think is so wonderful, and it is in many ways, but it's also a huge exposure.
Yeah, that is great advice. And as you were saying that, I'm like, yikes, holy crap. Because I think most people absolutely would assume it's covered. And again, for our listeners there, make sure to check, because I'm sure, it'll change jurisdiction to jurisdiction and policy to policy. But I think that's great advice, because I went to a conference recently and they talked about cybersecurity being one of the single greatest threats to businesses generally, and lawyers certainly would be exposed to that. Would you agree with that, Blair? About
it is by far your chances of being sued compared to your chance of being hacked. It's about 10 times greater, your chance of being hacked.
Wow.
And so it is a huge exposure. We see, I don't handle claims, but I hear of claims on a regular basis from my clientele. I would say we have cyber claims are 4 times to 1.
Wow.
To legal mal.
And I think that's rising. I mean, the level of sophistication.
Oh, it is.
And one of the experts speaking, which was terrifying to me, talked about the fact that the authorities cannot keep ahead of the hackers right now. It's a battle that they are losing, which is quite a terrible proposition.
As they say, the terrorist only has to be right once.
Yeah.
we have to be right 100% of the time. It's the same thing with the hacker. And just think of your laptop or your desk as your house. And your house, you don't leave the house with the door open and the garage door open and the windows unlocked when you leave. You have protocols to lock up your house before you leave. All those possessions you insure. And sometimes you even go so far as to have a monitoring system. Your computer is the same thing as your house. All that data that's inside that are your belongings. And I can't speak for the Canadian side of the practice, but on the ABA side, you're required as a lawyer under the rules and regulations of that to monitor, make sure you are using the utmost technology to keep that information safe for your client. And if you're not following the ABA rules, model rules.
Yeah, no, that's
So
great advice to protect yourself. So for our listeners, and I kind of chuckling when you talk about Canada versus the US, it reminds me of that Michael Moore movie when he went door to door and he said, in Canada, let's see if it's true that they don't lock their door. And he went and checked, and sure enough, he's down in Windsor and everybody's doors are open. That was hilarious.
yes,
So
yes, understood.
And
So just
I love to end by asking our guests, what is one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've ever had in your life, Larry? And again, this can be business, personal, or otherwise. Anything you'd like
this
to
is
share?
easy.
Oh,
This is easy for me, and I will. I'm a spiritual person, but I'm going to leave that out because I don't want to offend anybody from that side. But I will tell you that I don't know, Cindy, how long ago it was, but it's been at least 20 years. I started asking myself a question every morning. It's the same question I ask myself, that same question every single morning. The question is, do I want to have a good day or a bad day? I have yet to say, I think I want to have a bad day. I don't. I always want to have a good, when I start off my day with, I'm going to have a good day. Now, that doesn't mean I don't end up having a bad day from time to time, but my mindset is have a good day.
Oh, that is
And
so
so for me, that's really been a mantra for me to stay mentally healthy, to be happy in what I do. And as I said, I've never once said, I think I'll have a bad day today. I just feel like I want to have just never have said it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I ever will.
Sometimes our most powerful tools are the simplest things. I think that
Very simple little thing. And it's just saying to yourself, I'm going to have a good day.
Yeah.
No matter what comes, I'm going to have a good day.
And it's just those simple mindset shifts, right? I think that's beautiful.
It is a mindset shift.
And recognizing that it's a choice, because implicit in that question is a recognition that this is my choice. If
I have a choice. I do.
Yeah.
I have a choice as to, and how I respond to bad news is determined by how I started the day. If I said I'm going to have a bad day and bad news, well, I predicted I was going to, I take a totally different attitude when bad news comes, and it does come. We all have bad news come from time to time. But if your mindset is to have a good day, you're in a much better position to handle that. In my opinion, at least it's worked for me.
Oh, I think it's great. It reminds me of that quote, which I'm sure I'm going to bastardize here, but that, between every stimulus and a response, there is a space. And in that space lies your power to choose. And in that choice lies your path to freedom or something, right? It's such a, I think it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we're judged by how we respond to those things.
Yeah.
People see how you respond to adversity.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes back to that relationship building and who people see you as, who they know you as. Well, Blair, this has been unexpectedly very incredibly insightful, well beyond the insurance realms. Thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate your input here today.
Thank you for having me.
And for all our listeners out there, make sure if you want to learn more about Blair, check out their website at coastalinsurors.com or at Blair Campbell on LinkedIn. And we'll make sure to put those in the show notes so you can go check out Blair and give him a shout if you don't know enough about your liability insurance and whether or not you're protected. Note, though, that Blair services are only available in the state of Florida, but definitely worth an outreach there. And I am sure you have all got loads of value from this episode. And if so, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already done so, and make sure to share with anyone else that you think could get some value from this message. And let's face it, as lawyers, we can all dig in a little more to make sure we are living fully on purpose and practicing with purpose. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and find ways that you can practice on purpose. Find a better way to practice law so you can rekindle that passion and make a difference in the world, negotiating life and the practice of law on your terms. Thanks.